There are hundreds of modern haunting images around, some of which I've talked about in previous videos, but sometimes it's not the modern ones that are the creepiest, but the ones taken before mobile phones and high quality cameras were so mainstream. I'm talking about the ones that were taken a good 50 years ago, some even much older than that. So from a supernatural being that was witnessed by hundreds of thousands of people, to a very haunting practice that took place in the Victorian era. Here are 5 very haunting old school photographs that are just as powerful now as they were when they were first taken. Niagara Falls. This photograph is a super old one, taken on July the 19th, 1853, and is no doubt one of the first disaster photographs ever taken. It shows 17-year-old German immigrant Joseph or Samuel Avery fighting for his life, wedged between rocks less than 500 feet from the Niagara Falls. Avery, along with his friends, had been drinking the evening before and decided to take a small boat from Goat Island to the mainland. The boat was quickly drawn into the rapids, smashing against the rocks, and they stood no chance. Sadly, Joseph's friends were swept to their deaths over the falls, but Joseph managed to grab a log, to which he clung to all night. By morning, the incident was being watched by hundreds of locals who had gathered to try and rescue the stranded Joseph. A box of food was successfully floated out to him, and after 2 failed rescue attempts, an unmanned boat managed to reach him. Unfortunately though, the rope got caught in rocks, and Joseph, helped by onlookers from the shore, spent many hours trying to free it until it eventually snapped. In a 4th attempt, a raft was sent out and Joseph managed to climb on it, but again the rope got caught. Stranded on the raft, another one managed to reach him, but by now he was freezing and exhausted. He didn't have the strength to hold on and fell into the water. Avery went over the falls at 6 o'clock that day, having spent 20 hours clinging to life. The scream heard before his death is said to have haunted the onlookers for the rest of their lives. Our Lady of Zaytun. This next one is actually a series of photographs that all appear to show the same thing, the mass sighting of an apparition on the roof of the Church of Virgin Mary in Zaytun, Cairo. The first sighting was on April 2nd, 1968, when a man thought a woman was attempting suicide from the roof of the church. The police were notified, and it wasn't long before people started gathering to see what was going on and realised that it was not a woman but was an apparition of what people think was Saint Mary. The figure quickly disappeared, and the police were happy to explain the sighting as a reflection from a streetlight. But for 3 years after that first sighting, a bright apparition of a woman with a halo above her head, and sometimes doves around her, would last for a few minutes before disappearing around 3 times per week. Over the period of 3 years, this apparition was witnessed by hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world, including the former president of Egypt, and to this day no one can confirm what exactly the people were witnessing. Many believe that during the sightings, people in the area were miraculously healed from various illnesses, such as a blind man who was given back his eyesight, to a lady who lived near the church who said she had a vision in a dream of the Virgin Mary and was cured overnight of breast cancer. There is a lot of controversy about the images taken over a 3-year period from 1968 to 1971, but the photos have been confirmed as genuine, and even the skeptics have a hard time coming up with an explanation for what was witnessed by almost 1 million people. So what's your explanation for the sightings and the photographs of the supposed Virgin Mary of Zaytun? This next photograph is quite well known, but no other photograph shows the real horrors experienced by soldiers during World War I. It was taken in a trench in September 1916 during the Battle of Courcelette in France, and shows a broken man slumped in a muddy trench in the middle of a field, surrounded by death, having seen things no human should ever see. This is the face of a shell-shocked soldier, a misunderstood psychological trauma caused by being pushed far beyond the limits of human mental endurance. This poor man, along with so many others, would have experienced hysterical paralysis, nightmares, confusion, heart palpitations, along with impaired vision and hearing, as well as other debilitating symptoms. The sad thing is, this was in a time when mental illness was not understood, and many soldiers were put on trial for desertion, often branded cowards and considered weak-willed. Thankfully nowadays, the similar condition, post-traumatic stress disorder, is recognised and help is offered. But it took many years for the government to pardon the soldiers accused and executed for shell shock. Just looking at this image is a reminder of what millions of brave men and women went through during the World Wars, and reminds us never to forget that the world would be a much different place if not for them. Victorian postmortem photography. The Victorian era was a period in British history between 1837 to 1901. It was a period of peace, newfound prosperity, and saw huge industrial and technological change. It was also the era of a strange, disturbing practice of post-mortem family photos and portraits, not just in Britain but around the world. Often, a family would not have any group photos, and after a member had died, they would only have one last chance to have a photograph together. After they had passed away, they would be dressed up, sometimes having eyes painted on their eyelids, to then have a portrait or family picture taken. Sadly, in this era, child mortality was very high, and a post-mortem photograph would be the only way to have a photo of their child, so this was the most common form of post-mortem photography. This led to many eerie photos being taken, like this family photo with a deceased child on the floor surrounded by family, or this photo of John O'Connor taken in Nebraska 2 years after he had passed away and was embalmed in 1913. Post-mortem photography is now very rarely practiced anywhere in the world, but the old haunting photographs still live on. Corporal Yukio Araki. During World War II, the Japanese came up with a new way of doing damage to their opponents. Special planes were built or converted from regular planes to be piloted by kamikaze pilots. It was a one-way mission, and the planes were basically used as guided missiles. Some hit their targets and the others missed or were shot down before they could do any serious damage. This image of Japanese pilots happy and smiling has become one of Japan's most famous images of young kamikaze pilots. The pilot in the middle holding the puppy is 17-year-old Corporal Yukio Araki, and the day after this photo, he became the youngest ever kamikaze pilot to die during an attack. As a child, Yukio loved model aeroplanes, and at the age of 15, he started training as a pilot and quickly progressed until at the age of 17, he was assigned to fly Army Type 99 assault planes. In February 1945, all the men in Yukio's 23rd Training Squadron volunteered to make suicide attacks. In March of that year, the planes were prepared and Yukio was allowed home to visit his family for a final time. During his visit, he gave his family 3 letters and told them they were to be opened if he should die. On April the 21st, 1945, the 12-man squadron received orders to proceed to Nanking in China. En route, one pilot died and another was injured when they were attacked by American P-51 fighters. The group was ordered to return to Metabaro Air Base in Japan, and from there flew to another airbase where this photograph was taken. The next morning, Yukio wrote a final letter to his family, and along with 9 other planes, he took off on the suicide mission he had volunteered for, knowing he would never return. There is no exact record of whether Yukio hit his target, but Navy records show that 2 of the Type 99 planes inflicted damage to the US destroyer Brain, killing 66 people. Yukio, like all of the kamikaze pilots, had volunteered to die in defense of their country, and Yukio is now one of the most famous kamikaze pilots in Japanese history. So that's 5 haunting old-fashioned photographs. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next week for a very interesting video on the real American Horror Story serial killers.